The journey to the assembly station took 6 days. Yuna spent most of that time alone in her small cabin, reading and thinking. Her ship was called the Morning Star. It was not a warship. It was a simple diplomatic vessel, designed to carry ambassadors and their staff between worlds. It had no weapons. It had no shields. It was as harmless as a butterfly floating through space. When she finally arrived at the assembly station, she understood why the ancient races were so proud. The station was enormous. It was shaped like a ring, spinning slowly around a dying red star. The ring was so large that entire planets could fit inside it. Millions of creatures lived there, going about their daily lives, while the greatest powers in the galaxy made decisions that affected everyone. The station had been built by a species that no longer existed. They had vanished 3 million years ago, leaving behind only their buildings and their machines. No one knew what had happened to them. Some said they had moved to another galaxy. Others said they had evolved into beings of pure energy. A few whispered that the assembly had destroyed them, just like they had destroyed so many others. Yuna's ship was met by an escort of 4 warships. They belonged to the Velthari, one of the most powerful species in the assembly. The Velthari looked like tall birds covered in scales instead of feathers. They had ruled their part of the galaxy for 600,000 years. They considered themselves the natural leaders of all intelligent life. The warships were each 100 times larger than the Morning Star. They flew in a diamond formation around her, so close that she could see the gun ports on their hulls. Each gun was powerful enough to destroy a city. Each ship carried enough firepower to turn a planet into rubble. This was not an escort. This was a warning. Yuna watched the warships through her window and felt nothing. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. When she landed on the station, she was met by a group of Velthari guards. They were tall and thin, with long necks and eyes that shone like yellow gems. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. They looked at her the way a cat looks at a mouse. One of them spoke. His translator turned his clicking sounds into English. "Ambassador Park, you will follow us." It was not a request. They led her through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were made of a metal she did not recognize. The lights were dim and flickered strangely. Other creatures moved past them, going about their business. Some of them looked at Yuna with curiosity. Others looked at her with disgust. Most did not look at her at all. Finally, they reached the assembly chamber. It was shaped like a bowl, with seats rising up on all sides. Hundreds of different species filled those seats. Some were humanoid, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Others were insectoid, with many limbs and compound eyes. Still others were things that Yuna could not describe, creatures that existed in ways her human brain struggled to understand. At the top of the chamber, on 5 raised platforms, sat the high speakers. They were the leaders of the 5 most powerful species in the galaxy. They made the laws. They decided who lived and who died. They had been making such decisions for longer than humans had existed. Yuna was led to a small platform at the very bottom of the chamber. She had to look up to see anyone. Every creature in the room was above her, looking down. It was designed this way on purpose. It was meant to make her feel small and weak. She stood straight and waited. The high speaker of the Velthari rose from his seat. His name was Vorath, and he was 700 years old. He had watched civilizations rise and fall. He had ordered the deaths of billions. He looked at Yuna the way a person looks at an insect they are about to step on. "The human has arrived," he announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Let the judgment begin." Judgment. Not discussion, not negotiation. Judgment. Yuna kept her face calm. Vorath continued speaking. "Humanity has existed as a space-traveling species for only 40 years. In that time, they have spread to 19 worlds. They have built ships and weapons. They have fought wars and won them. They breed without control. They consume without thought. They are a plague upon the galaxy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Lights flashed. Sounds clicked and hummed. The ancient species were nodding their approval. The assembly has voted, Vorath said. Humanity will be contained. Their colonies will be destroyed. Their ships will be taken. Their homeworld will be surrounded. They will be allowed to live, but only in small numbers. Only under our control. He spread his wings wide. This is mercy. The Korath were not shown such kindness. Be grateful, human. Yuna looked up at him. She looked at the hundreds of species gathered in the chamber. She saw their contempt. She saw their arrogance. She saw creatures who had lived for millions of years and believed that age gave them the right to decide who deserved to exist. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about all the humans who had fought and died and struggled and dreamed. She thought about the children who would never be born if the assembly had their way. And she felt something cold settle in her heart. "May I speak?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but clear. Vorath made a gesture with his wing. "You may beg. It will change nothing. But speak if you wish." She took a deep breath. She looked at all the faces staring down at her. And then she raised her hand. She lifted one finger. Just one. Her index finger pointing straight up at the ceiling. The chamber fell silent. Everyone stared at the small human woman with her single raised finger. They did not understand. Some of them laughed. Others made sounds of confusion. Vorath tilted his head. "What is this? Some human gesture of surrender?" "No," Yuna said. Her voice was still quiet, but now it carried a weight that made the laughter stop. "This is your one chance to change your minds." The silence stretched. Then the laughter came again, louder this time, mocking, cruel. But Yuna did not lower her finger. She stood there, small and alone, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The laughter echoed through the great chamber like thunder. Every species, every creature, every ancient being found it funny. A small human woman, standing at the bottom of a pit, surrounded by the mightiest powers in the galaxy, raising one finger and asking them to change their minds. It was the best joke they had heard in centuries. Vorath's yellow eyes glittered with amusement. "You stand alone, little human. Your species has 200 ships. We have millions. Your world's number 19. We control thousands. You have existed for a heartbeat. We have existed for ages. What possible reason could we have to fear you?" Yuna kept her finger raised. The smile had not left her face, but it had changed. It was no longer warm. It was no longer friendly. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. "Let me tell you a story," she said. The laughter began to fade. There was something in her voice that made the ancient creatures pause, something that did not fit with the image of a helpless victim. 40 years ago, Yuna continued, humans discovered faster than light travel. Do you know how we discovered it? No one answered. "We were at war with ourselves," she said. Two groups of humans fighting over land and power and old hatreds. The war lasted 7 years. 3 billion people died. 3 billion. Nearly half of everyone alive at that time. She paused and let the number hang in the air. And then, in the ruins of a burned city, a scientist named Beck Gia built the first jump drive. She used broken machines and stolen parts. She worked alone because everyone she loved was dead. She wanted to prove that humans could be more than killers. Yuna's eyes moved across the chamber. She succeeded. And do you know what humanity did with her gift? Vorath shifted on his platform. The amusement in his eyes was fading. We turned it into a weapon, Yuna said. Immediately. Within 6 months, we had built missiles that could jump through space and appear next to any target. Within a year, we had learned to pull energy from the fabric of the universe itself. Within 5 years, we had mapped the location of every important world within 500 light-years. The chamber was silent now, truly silent. Even the creatures who communicated through light and vibration had gone still. Your spies tell you that our fleet is 200 ships, Yuna said. This is true. What your spies do not know is what those ships carry. She lowered her finger and clasped her hands behind her back. She began to walk slowly in her small circle, like a teacher explaining a lesson to students. We call it the collapse drive. It is based on technology we borrowed from you. We studied your jump gates. We took them apart and learned how they worked. And then we asked ourselves a question that none of you had ever asked. What if we could use this technology not to move ships, but to move gravity itself? Speaker Thenai of the Crystalline Consortium spoke for the first time. Her voice sounded like glass wind chimes. That is impossible. The laws of physics do not allow it. You are correct, Yuna said. It breaks 17 of your fundamental laws. Humans do not care about your laws. We are very good at breaking rules. She stopped walking and looked up at Thenai. One collapse drive activated at the correct coordinates creates a chain reaction. Gravity begins to fold in on itself. The effect spreads outward like ripples in water. Within 72 hours, the sun at the center of the system begins to collapse. The planets fall inward. Everything in that system dies. Stars, planets, moons, everything. The silence was absolute. Yuna could hear her own heartbeat. Vorath leaned forward. His scales had turned pale. You are lying. Am I? Yuna tilted her head. You mentioned the Korath earlier. Such a sad story. A peaceful species, destroyed for growing too quickly. But did you know that they were not as harmless as you believed? She began to pace again. We found their records, on a moon that your weapons missed. The Korath were building something. They called it the Dying Light. It was similar to our collapse drive. They were 18 months away from completing it when you killed them. She stopped and looked directly at Vorath. We finished their work in 6 months. The High Speaker of the Velthari stood frozen. His wings trembled slightly. Around him, the other speakers exchanged looks. The representatives of 1,000 species stared down at the small human woman who had just told them that she could destroy suns. Every one of our 200 ships carries a collapse drive, Yuna said. Every single one. They are scattered across human space right now. Some of them are probably quite close to your most important worlds. We have been very careful about positioning. She raised her finger again. This time no one laughed. Your assembly has 412 core systems, the hearts of your civilizations, your homeworlds, your capitals, your sacred places. If you attack humanity, we will not fight your fleets. We will not defend our colonies. We will simply reach out and remove 200 of those systems from existence. Vorath found his voice. Your own worlds would die. Your own people would be destroyed. Yes, Yuna said simply. All 19 of our colonies, Earth itself, 12 billion humans, gone. She shrugged. And in exchange, we will take half of everything you have ever built. 400 trillion lives, ended in fire and darkness. She smiled that cold smile again. The Korath believed in mercy. They trusted that civilization meant something. They died for that belief. Her voice hardened. We are not the Korath. We have read your histories. We know what you do to species that you consider threats. And we have decided as a people that if we are going to die, we will not die alone. She spread her arms wide. So here I am. One small woman, one raised finger, and behind that finger, the death of half a galaxy. The ancient creatures of the assembly stared at her in horror. And Park Yuna stood in the center of their power and did not blink. The chamber erupted into chaos. Creatures shouted and screamed. Lights flashed in patterns of alarm. The crystalline beings rang like broken bells. The insectoid species clicked and buzzed so loudly that the sound became painful. The very walls seemed to shake with the force of so many ancient beings experiencing fear for the first time in thousands of years. Vorath slammed his wings against his platform. The sound was like thunder, and it cut through the noise. Silence! The chamber slowly quieted, but the tension remained. It hung in the air, like smoke from a fire. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception was focused on the small human woman standing at the center of the room. Vorath's voice was tight with anger, and something else. Something he had not felt in centuries. You are bluffing. No species would create such a weapon. It would mean your own death. It would be madness. Yuna looked up at him calmly. Let me explain something about humans, speaker. Something your intelligence gatherers may have missed. She began to walk slowly around her platform again. Her footsteps were the only sound in the massive chamber. We are a species born from violence, she said. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day. Predators hunted us. Diseases ravaged us. The weather froze us and burned us. And we survived. We did not just survive, we conquered. She stopped and faced the assembly. We killed the predators. We cured the diseases. We built shelters against the weather. And then, when we had defeated every external threat, we turned on each other. We fought wars for land, wars for resources, wars for ideas, wars for pride. Her voice was steady. In the last century before we reached the stars, we developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. And we came very close to using them. She held up 2 fingers. 2 nations. 2 leaders. Each with their finger on a button that would end everything. And do you know what stopped them? Not wisdom. Not morality. Not love of life. She lowered her hand. Fear. Mutual fear. The knowledge that if one side attacked, the other side would attack back, and everyone would die together. Speaker Thenai's crystalline form flickered nervously. This is insanity. Yes, Yuna agreed. It is completely insane, and it worked. For 50 years, humans lived under the shadow of total destruction. We went to sleep every night, knowing that we might not wake up. We raised our children, knowing that they might be vaporized before they grew old. And we survived, because both sides knew that the cost of war was too high. She looked around the chamber. You have been rulers for so long that you have forgotten what it means to be weak. You exterminate species that threaten you, because you can. The Korath begged for mercy, and you killed them anyway. The Threll Unity asked for negotiations, and you burned their worlds. You have never faced an enemy who could hurt you as badly as you hurt them. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it carried to every corner of the vast room. Until now. Vorath's claws scraped against his platform. If we attacked you right now, your ships could not react in time. We could destroy humanity before you launched a single weapon. Could you? Yuna asked softly. Are you certain? Are you absolutely certain that you know where all of our ships are? Are you certain that we have not hidden some of them near your homeworld? Near your children's schools? Near your temples and your monuments and everything you hold sacred? She shook her head slowly. You are not certain. And that uncertainty will haunt you forever. The chamber was so quiet that Yuna could hear her own breathing. Let me give you some numbers, she said. Your assembly contains over 800 species. You control most of the known galaxy. Your total population is approximately 900 trillion beings. That is a very large number. She held up one finger again. Humanity has 12 billion people. That is a very small number compared to yours. We are insects next to giants, drops of water next to an ocean. She paused. But each of our 200 ships can destroy one of your star systems. 200 systems. Hundreds of billions of lives in each one. She smiled. If you do the mathematics, you will find that even if you destroy every human in existence, we will take approximately 400 trillion of you with us. Almost half of your entire population, half of all the families, half of all the children, half of all the dreams and hopes and futures. Her smile faded. Is that a trade you are willing to make? Will you sacrifice half of everything you are, just to eliminate one small species? Will you look at your children and tell them that they might die so that you can feel safe? Vorath did not answer. None of the high speakers answered. The chamber remained silent. Yuna nodded slowly. I did not think so. She straightened her uniform and clasped her hands in front of her. Here is what will happen now. I will leave this chamber. I will return to Earth. I will tell my people that the Galactic Assembly has decided to reconsider its position on human containment. In exchange, humanity will continue to follow the expansion protocols. We will stay in our designated territories. We will not provoke anyone. We will be good neighbors. She looked at each of the high speakers in turn. But if you ever threaten us again, if you ever send another message about our continued existence, if you ever think about treating us like the Korath. Her eyes locked with Vorath's. I will not come to another meeting. I will not give another speech. I will simply send a signal. One signal. And half your galaxy will burn. She raised her finger one final time. Remember this moment. Remember this finger. Remember the day that humanity stopped asking for permission to exist. Then she lowered her hand, turned her back on the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and walked toward the exit. No one moved to stop her. No one said a word. And somewhere, in the hearts of ancient creatures who had not known fear for millennia, a cold seed of doubt began to grow. The walk back to her ship was the longest of Yuna's life. She kept her back straight and her pace steady. She did not look behind her. She did not hurry. Every step was careful and measured, like a person walking through a room full of sleeping predators. The Velthari guards who had escorted her to the chamber were gone. No one came to guide her. No one came to stop her. The corridors of the great station were strangely empty, as if the entire population had decided to hide. She reached the Morning Star without incident. The ship was exactly where she had left it, small and fragile among the massive warships that still surrounded the docking bay. She walked up the ramp, entered the ship, and sealed the door behind her. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking. She looked down at them and watched them tremble. Her legs felt weak. Her heart was pounding so hard that she could feel it in her throat. She had kept all of this hidden during her speech, but now, alone in the quiet of her ship, she could finally let the fear show. She made her way to the cockpit and sat down in the pilot's chair. Through the window, she could see the Velthari warships. They had not moved. Their weapons were not active. They were simply watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Yuna activated the ship's communication system and connected to a secure channel. A face appeared on the screen. It was Kim Do-hun, her assistant, still back on Earth. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. He had been waiting for her call. "Ambassador," he said, his voice cracking with relief. "You are alive." "I am alive," Yuna confirmed. "The meeting is over. I am coming home." She did not say anything else. She did not need to. Do-hun would understand that the details could wait until she was safely back on Earth. The journey home took another 6 days. During that time, Yuna slept very little. She spent her hours staring out the window at the stars, thinking about what she had done and what it might mean. She had threatened to destroy half the galaxy. She had looked into the eyes of beings who had ruled the universe for millions of years, and told them that humanity would burn everything rather than submit. It was the greatest bluff in human history. Or was it a bluff? That was the question that would haunt the assembly for generations. That was the question that would keep them awake at night, wondering and worrying, and never quite sure. When Yuna's ship finally landed on Earth, she was greeted by a crowd of officials and reporters. She smiled for the cameras. She shook hands with generals and politicians. She gave a short statement, saying that the negotiations had gone well, and that humanity's future was secure. No one asked her how she had done it. No one asked about the details of her conversation with the assembly. Perhaps they were afraid of the answer. 3 months later, the Galactic Assembly passed a new resolution. It recognized humanity as a full member species, with all the rights and protections that entailed. The vote was unanimous. Every species that had laughed at Yuna now agreed that humans deserved respect. Yuna attended the signing ceremony on the assembly station. She stood between Speaker Vorath and Speaker Thenai, smiling for the holocameras. Vorath did not look at her. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed his mark onto the document. Thenai's crystalline form flickered nervously whenever Yuna came too close. They were afraid of her. The most powerful beings in the galaxy were afraid of a small human woman who stood barely 5 feet tall. Good, Yuna thought. Let them be afraid. After the ceremony, she returned to her ship for the journey home. Dohun was waiting for her in the cockpit. He had been quiet throughout the entire trip, but she could see that something was bothering him. Something he wanted to ask, but was afraid to say. Finally, as the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, and the stars stretched into lines of light, he spoke. "Ambassador, I need to know something." Yuna looked at him. "Ask." Dohun swallowed hard. "The collapse drives, the weapons you described, the ability to destroy entire star systems." He paused. "Are they real?" Yuna did not answer immediately. She turned back to the window and watched the lights of the universe stream past. So many stars, so many worlds, so many lives, all of them now safe because of what she had done. Finally, she spoke. "Let me tell you something about humans, Dohun. Something that the assembly will never understand." She turned to face him. "Our greatest weapon is not our technology. It is not our ships, or our soldiers, or our willingness to die. Our greatest weapon is that no one can ever truly know what we are capable of." She smiled slightly. When a human tells you they will burn the world rather than lose, you can never be completely certain that they are lying. You can never be sure that they will not do exactly what they promised. Dohun stared at her. "But Ambassador, that does not answer my question. The collapse drives, do they exist or not?" Yuna leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. "Does it matter? The assembly believes they exist. They will act as if they exist. They will treat humanity with respect because they fear what might happen if they do not. The truth is less important than the belief." She opened her eyes and looked at her assistant. "But if you really want to know, if you really need an answer, I will give you one." Dohun waited, barely breathing. It was the same smile she had worn in the assembly chamber. Cold, knowing, dangerous. "We are humans," she said. "We split the atom and built bombs that could destroy cities. We created diseases in laboratories that could wipe out millions. We turned every piece of technology we ever invented into a weapon." Her eyes gleamed in the light of passing stars. "Do you really think we would reach the stars and suddenly become peaceful?" She turned away from him, looking out at the infinite darkness. "Let them wonder," she whispered. "Let them fear. Let them look at every human ship and ask themselves if this is the one that carries the fire that will end their world." Dohun did not ask any more questions. And somewhere, in laboratories hidden deep beneath the surface of a small blue planet called Earth, scientists continued their work in silence. What they were building, only a few people knew. Whether it would ever be used, no one could say. But the galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity was small. Humanity was young. Humanity was surrounded by ancient powers that could crush them like insects. And humanity was absolutely terrifying. Because when you push a human into a corner, when you threaten everything they love, when you try to take away their right to exist, they do not beg for mercy. They raise one finger, and they smile. The message came from the stars on a cold morning in December. Park Yuna was drinking her tea when her assistant rushed into the room. His name was Kim Do-hun, a young man with worried eyes and a tablet in his shaking hands. He placed the tablet on her desk without saying a word. Yuna looked at his face and knew something was very wrong. She picked up the tablet and read the message. It was written in the common language that all space-traveling species used. The words were formal and cold. The Galactic Assembly was calling humanity to answer for its crimes. They wanted a representative to come to the great station where all the powerful races met. They wanted to discuss the future of the human race. Yuna read the message 3 times. Each time her heart grew heavier. She was the ambassador of United Earth. It was her job to speak for all 8 billion humans who lived on Earth and the 12 colonies spread across nearby star systems. She had held this job for 15 years. She had met aliens who looked like insects, aliens who were made of living crystal, and aliens who existed as clouds of gas. She had signed treaties and trade agreements. She had smiled and shook hands with creatures that had no hands. But she had never received a message like this one. The Galactic Assembly was made up of the oldest and most powerful species in the known galaxy. They had been traveling between stars for millions of years before humans learned to make fire. They controlled thousands of worlds and commanded fleets of ships that could block out the sun. When they spoke, everyone listened. When they gave orders, everyone obeyed. And now they wanted to talk about humanity's future. Yuna knew what that meant. She had studied the history of the galaxy. She knew about the Korath, a species of gentle beings who had made beautiful music and art. The assembly had decided that the Korath were growing too fast. They had called the Korath to a meeting just like this one. The Korath sent their best diplomats, their kindest voices, their most reasonable arguments. The assembly destroyed them anyway, every single one. Their worlds were burned, their cities were turned to dust, their music was silenced forever. Now the Korath were just a sad story that older species told to younger ones, a warning about what happened to those who grew too bold. Do-hun was still standing by her desk. His face was pale. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "what will we do?" Yuna set down the tablet. She walked to the window of her office and looked out at the city below. Seoul had changed so much in the last 50 years. Tall buildings reached toward the sky. Flying cars moved between them like metal birds. In the distance, she could see the space elevator, a thin line stretching up into the clouds and beyond. Humanity had come so far. They had crawled out of caves and learned to farm. They had built cities and then destroyed them in wars. They had split the atom and nearly killed themselves with it. They had poisoned their planet and then worked together to heal it. And finally they had reached the stars. It had only been 40 years since humans discovered how to travel faster than light. A scientist named Baekjia had figured out the secret. She had been working alone in a small laboratory, using equipment that was old and broken. Everyone had told her it was impossible. She did it anyway. That was the human way. In those 40 years, humanity had spread to 19 worlds. They had built colonies on frozen moons and burning deserts. They had learned to grow food in places where nothing should grow. They had made friends with some alien species and enemies with others. They had fought small wars and won most of them. The older species did not like this. Humans bred too fast, they said. Humans consumed too many resources. Humans were too aggressive, too hungry, too dangerous. They looked at humanity and saw a disease spreading across the galaxy. And now they had decided to do something about it. Yuna turned away from the window. Her face was calm, but inside she felt a storm of emotions. Fear, anger, sadness, and something else. Something hard and cold that sat in her chest like a stone. Determination. "Prepare my ship," she said to Dohun. "I will go to the assembly." Dohun's eyes went wide. "Alone? Ambassador, that is too dangerous. You should take guards. You should take a fleet. We cannot let them think we are weak." Yuna shook her head slowly. "If I bring a fleet, they will see it as a threat. They will use it as an excuse to attack. If I bring guards, they will laugh at how few we have." She picked up the tablet again and looked at the message. "No. I will go alone. One human, one voice. Let them see that we are not afraid." She could see it in his face. But he was a good assistant. He knew when to push and when to step back. He bowed his head and left the room to make the arrangements. Yuna sat down at her desk. She had 3 days before she needed to leave. 3 days to prepare for the most important meeting in human history. 3 days to figure out how to save her species from extinction. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a terrible war when she was young. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about those dark days, about hiding in cellars while bombs fell, about eating grass and roots because there was no food, about watching friends die and still finding the strength to keep going. "Yuna," her grandmother had said once, holding her small hand in her wrinkled one, "humans are not the strongest creatures. We are not the fastest or the smartest, but we are the most stubborn. When the world tells us to give up, we refuse. When death comes for us, we spit in its face. That is our gift. That is our curse. Never forget it." Yuna had never forgotten. She opened her computer and began to work. She read everything she could find about the assembly. She studied the species who led it. She learned their histories, their fears, their weaknesses. She made plans and then threw them away and made new ones. And deep in her mind, in a place she did not look at directly, an idea began to form. A terrible idea. A beautiful idea. An idea that might save humanity or doom it forever. She worked through the night, and when the sun rose over Seoul, she was ready.